Wait a minute, that's not right. Backlash gave us a great crowd and our first title change post-Mania. The King and Queen of the Ring tournaments kick off, including matches from 2 brand new main roster stars, and with a whole bunch of title defenses, we ponder who's next. Okay, and the news! And the news indeed, as we have our first new champion since WrestleMania at the Backlash Premium Live event from Lyon, France. Wow, did we have an amazing crowd for both SmackDown and Backlash. What a weekend. They really showed out this weekend. Props to the crowd before we get started. So in our championship match, we had Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair challenging the Kabuki Warriors for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Now, the Kabuki Warriors showed amazing chemistry, but it was just not enough for the 2 powerhouses of Jade and Bianca. Jade hit an amazing Jaded on Kyrie after spinning and tossing her up into the air and all about, and then Bianca hit a KOD on Asuka and pinned her to have Bianca and Jade become the new WWE Women's Tag Team Champions. They are just 2-0 in traditional tag matches, but also have that win at WrestleMania with Naomi over Damage Control, so a very impressive start for them. For the Kabuki Warriors, this was just their first loss as they fall to 5-1-1 in tag matches in 2024. So I look forward to a very quick rematch on this one. But let's go to our match of the week featuring our other women's match at Backlash, Bayley defending versus Naomi and Tiffany Stratton. This was a frenetically paced match with all 3 women showing out inside the ring all at once. It was an amazing start, but it turned around when Naomi and Bayley teamed up to hit a 1D. I wonder where Naomi could have thought of that one. Nonetheless, that got Tiffany out of the way, and the other 2 slugged it out and then traded some pinning combinations before Bayley finally got the 1-2-3 to retain the championship. That was her first successful defense since WrestleMania, and she is now 5-1 in singles matches in 2024. For both Naomi and Tiffany, they have struggled in multi-person singles matches as both of them are 0-3 in such matches in 2024. On the men's side, Cody Rhodes put up his undisputed WWE Championship against AJ Styles. It was a long, slow match, but the crowd was truly the MVP on this one. I don't know what they were saying most of the time, but I'm sure it was phenomenal. Now, eventually, Rhodes was able to take control, hitting a Cody Cutter and then a Crossroads to get the win. That was his first successful title defense, and he is 7-1 in singles action in 2024. For Styles, he is now just 1-4-1 in one-on-one action, and it's put a stop to his 2-match winning streak in any type of singles match. On the Raw side, Damian Priest defended the World Heavyweight Championship against Jey Uso. Even though the Judgment Day had been biting at each other's heels a little bit the last couple of weeks, JD McDonough really came through for Priest when he put Priest foot on the bottom rope after Jey had landed 3 super kicks, a spear, and an Uso splash that surely would have gotten Jey the championship. Later, Balor also came in to distract. That didn't work out very well for him as Jey put him down for a spear as well, but at least it gave Priest an opening where he hit a South of Heaven chokeslam from the turnbuckle to get the win. That was Priest's first title defense as well since winning the title at WrestleMania, and he is 3-1 in one-on-one matches in 2024. For Jey, that was his first loss since March and stopped a 5-match singles winning streak. Our other match at Backlash was the opener featuring the bloodline of Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga versus Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. Just like they had done the night before and the weeks leading up to it, they fought before the match, which caused General Manager Aldis to come out and declare this match a street fight. And the street fight had everything. It had chairs, it had tables, it had kendo sticks, it had garbage cans, and it had Kevin Owens landing an amazing brainbuster through some chairs set up in the middle of the ring on Tonga that surely would have gotten Owens the win, but a new Bloodline member and Tama Tonga's brother, Tonga Loa, came out of the crowd and pulled the ref out from under the bottom rope to stop the count. Tonga Loa then used the chair to knock out both Owens and Orton before Sikoa landed a spinning solo and a Samoan spike on Orton to get the pin and a win in the Bloodline's first match as a duo. For Orton and Owens, surprisingly, as a team, they are just now 1-2. Moving on to SmackDown, the night before, we had one championship match there as well for the WWE Tag Team Championships, defended by A-Town Down Under against the Street Profits. Grayson Waller capitalized when the ref was tending to an injured Montez Ford, and he hit a rolling flatliner on Dawkins to get the pin. For A-Town Down Under, this was their first defense and match of any sort since WrestleMania, and they are 4-2 in 2024. For the Street Profits, even though they qualified with a win, to get this match, they are just 1-3 in traditional tag matches in 2024. The other tag match on SmackDown on the men's side featured the New Catch Republic versus the Authors of Pain. Now this match you might just see on Raw in a couple weeks, as both teams are moving to the red brand. Scarlett and Cross teamed up for a distraction where Cross was able to take out Tyler Bate, which also distracted Dunn and let AOP hit a sit-out powerbomb neckbreaker team maneuver to pin Dunn and get the win. AOP moves to 3-1 in traditional tag matches, while the New Catch Republic still has a very impressive 7-2 record in traditional tags. On the women's side, we did have an 8-woman tag match, setting up both women's championship matches at Backlash the following night. This one also saw Bianca land a KOD to get the win, and it was the first match for both pairs, and we probably won't see those combinations again, so not too much at stake there. Our last match on SmackDown was LA Knight versus Angel, and as Legado del Fantasma often does, Berto tried to distract Knight, but it failed, and Knight knocked him off of the apron and then immediately landed a BFT on Angel to get the win. Knight goes to 5-2-1 in one-on-one matches, while Angel falls to 0-2. Beyond the mat on SmackDown, Carmelo Hayes talked to Nick Aldis about entering into the King of the Ring, which Aldis would not commit to at the time, when he also then talked to Bobby Lashley, but apparently Hayes does not think he needs any help from Lashley. Carlito, in a backstage interview with Byron Saxton, told him that he only attacked Lee so he could get his WrestleMania moment. Lee then came in and attacked Carlito before Carlito was able to run away. Finally, Paul Heyman talked to Nick Aldis and told him that he was the one that pulled Roman Reigns from the WWE draft, and that he has not spoken to Reigns since WrestleMania. Heyman also tried to convince Aldis to stop the match between the Bloodline and Orton and Owens for Backlash, and when Aldis would not do so, he also tried to convince Orton and Owens themselves on the RKO show, where they were obviously unsuccessful as well. Then on Raw, we kicked off the King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring tournaments with 3 first-round matchups each. First, for the men in the King of the Ring, the main event was Gunther versus Sheamus, rekindling their long-term rivalry. This was just as you expected, another banger with some hard-hitting, chop-fest action deserving of the main event. Kaiser hooked Sheamus's right knee into the ropes and then drop-kicked him. The ref didn't see it, but noticed something seemed to be off, so he ejected Kaiser. Unfortunately, if he had seen it, this could have been a DQ win for Sheamus. Nonetheless, Gunther worked on Sheamus's knee for the rest of the match and was able to lock in the half crab on 2 separate occasions. And on the second, he was able to hold it in long enough to force Sheamus to tap out. to get a submission victory. Gunther is now 2-0 since WrestleMania, and he will face the winner of Kofi Kingston versus Rey Mysterio next week. For Sheamus, this was his first loss since returning and is now 2-1. The second King of the Ring match was between Ilya Dragunov and Ricochet. Now this was Dragunov's first official match on the main roster, but his second since WrestleMania. Now Ricochet wowed the crowd with several high-flying moves during the match, but it was not enough after Dragunov landed a superplex and then his second H-bomb to get the win. Dragunov now is 2-0 in those two matches since WrestleMania. For Ricochet, this breaks up his undefeated record in one-on-one matches in 2024, as he's now 3-1. The third match actually kicked off the show between Finn Balor and Jey Uso. Apparently the Judgment Day is now back on the same page, with everyone who was there apologizing to each other. And then Balor said that he was going to take the bye after it was determined that Drew McIntyre was not medically cleared for the match. However, Adam Pearce came out and said that he would have an opponent, and it proved to be Jey Uso. Drew McIntyre did come out of the crowd during the match to distract Jey, but it backfired as Jey landed a spear to get the win. For Jey, he's right back into the win column after Backlash and is 6-3 in one-on-one matches, and he will face Dragunov next week. For Balor, it's almost surprising he's in this tournament, as he's now 0-4 in singles action this year. On the women's side, for the Queen of the Ring, Io Sky made her return to action after losing the championship at WrestleMania, where she took on Natalya. Natalya almost won with a sit-out powerbomb, but Io landed her patent moonsault to eventually get the win. For Io, she is now 3-1 this year. She will face the winner of Shayna Baszler versus Zelina Vega next week. Natalya, that was her first one-on-one match of 2024. The second women's match featured another Damage Control member. This time it was Dakota Kai replacing an injured Asuka, taking on Lyra Valkyria in her first Raw match. Dakota landed a vicious stomp from the middle rope, but it wasn't enough, as Lyra eventually hit a Nightwing to get the win in her first match on the main roster. For Dakota, she drops to 0-3 in one-on-one matches. The third women's match was between Zoe Stark and Ivy Nile. Ivy showed some impressive power, including holding Zoe up in the air for a suplex for several seconds, but eventually Zoe hit a Z360 to get the win. Zoe is now 1-1 in one-on-one matches, and she will face Lyra next week. For Ivy, she's just 1-3 in one-on-one matches. Our only other match on Raw was between Chad Gable and Bronson Reed. This match was very quickly interrupted by Sami Zayn, who first attacked Gable, giving Gable the disqualification victory. However, after all three battled for a short while, it was Reed who left both men laying once again. For Gable, he improves to 2-2 in one-on-one matches, but for Reed, he drops, unfortunately this time, to 1-5, since he didn't really deserve to lose that one. However, either way, it doesn't matter too much, as afterwards, Zayn announced that the three men would face off in a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship at King and Queen of the Ring in a few weeks. Beyond the mat on Raw, Liv somehow said that she didn't have a purpose, even though she's been on her Liv Morgan revenge tour, but apparently now does, because Becky Lynch didn't happen to bring up her name during her in-ring interview with Michael Cole. And lastly, unfortunately, Kofi Kingston said he's participating in the King of the Ring tournament because Xavier Woods was injured last week in his match against Gunther and will not be able to compete. It's a pretty bad start when three of the Raw superstars were not able to compete in the very first round of King of the Ring. Well, there were a few potential candidates this week for What Were You Thinking on Raw with those Queen of the Ring matches, but we don't have any time for that with all those matches we just talked about, so let's go right to the OK question of the week. Sports Zoo, what is it? Doc, the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments kicked off on Raw this week. This year's features 16 men and 16 women. Everybody loves a good bracket-style tournament, and some of the biggest legends in WWE history have previously been Kings of the Ring. With all that said, should we have the King of the Ring and the Queen of the Ring tournaments more often than we do? Perhaps once a year? All those legendary winners, like when Baron Corbin beat Chad Gable in 2019 and then turned him into Shorty G afterwards. Yeah, that was certainly one to remember. Anyways, to answer your question, the answer is no. No, we should not have a King and Queen of the Ring every single year. It wouldn't be special then. Maybe it should be every other year perhaps, because the last time I checked, Kings and Queens don't have 1-year terms, if you know what I mean. I mean, come on now, let's see. I think they usually stick it out a little bit longer than that. So let's keep this to a limited event every once in a while, every 2 or 3 years at most, even though I do agree with you that these bracket style tournaments are great. Perhaps we should do that more often to determine #1 contenders, I would say, however. That said, maybe the best thing we could do is have a whole bunch of contenders in the bracket, and then the winner of that bracket then goes to face the prior winner. So the challenger from the bracket faces the current king or queen to determine if that king or queen will get another term or if a new king or queen will be crowned. Sounds like a plan to me, right? We had so many championship matches this past week that we need to figure out who's next. This week's Who's Next might be a little trickier than most since we did just have the draft and the rosters have now shuffled a little bit. However, let's start on the top with all of the Raw championships. First, the World Heavyweight Championship was successfully defended by Damian Priest at Backlash. So, who should his #1 contender be? Drew McIntyre. Now, we did just see that he was unable to compete this past week due to an injured elbow, but assuming he is able to return quickly, he is still 7-2 in one-on-one matches and was the most recent champion before getting cashed in on by Priest at WrestleMania. The #2 contender, even with the loss of Backlash, should be Jey Uso. He suffered his first loss since March 4th and is 6-1 in one-on-one matches. The third contender is a little going out on a limb. It seems that Gunther is not interested in the Intercontinental title at the moment, so we're going to assume he's going to want to challenge for the World Heavyweight Championship instead. So he gets our third spot at this point. Going into Monday night, he was 4-1 in one-on-one matches. I do want to note that we're not going to count the records from Raw on Monday, as these are taken from after Backlash. Who should not be a top contender for the World Heavyweight Championship? Well, this might be a theme that you're going to see here, but this time it should be Seth Rollins. Since he has not wrestled at all since WrestleMania, he is getting pulled from the contender list. However, as soon as he comes back and wrestles one time, I think we might be able to get him right back near or at the top of the list. Moving on to the Women's World Championship. What a difference a few weeks make, and I have to say I feel a little sheepish here, as our #1 contender is now Liv Morgan. But I have to say it's more of the fact that no one else is really even doing anything. As they say, the best ability is sometimes availability. And she's the only one that's available, as she is the only woman left on the Raw roster to have a women's singles win since March 18th, other than Becky as champion. So, Liv, I guess you've somehow found a way to earn that spot as #1 contender. But you'll see why she's the #1 contender here next. Our #2 contender, Ivy Nile. Yeah, we did just see her lose in the first round of the Queen of the Ring tournament, but like I said, that does not count. Going into Raw on Monday night, she was the only other woman to have a women's single win on Raw in 2024. That does not count Roxanne Perez, since she is not on the Raw brand, and it also does not count anyone that's only a free agent, such as Raquel Rodriguez in this particular instance. Or of course, Rhea Ripley. Our third contender is no one, as no one else has a singles win on Raw in 2024. Wow. Thank goodness the Queen of the Ring tournament is actually giving us some women's singles matches to change that. So after Queen of the Ring, I'm sure we'll have a much better look at who should be the next contenders. But who shouldn't be the contender here, just like Seth Rollins should not be, it again is Io Sky, because she did not wrestle at all since WrestleMania. Fortunately, she did enter into the Queen of the Ring tournament and won her first match. For the Intercontinental Championship, won by Sami Zayn at WrestleMania, Braun Breaker is going to be our #1 contender, as he is 4-0 in one-on-one matches since joining the main roster. Breaker was on SmackDown, so that does make it a little dicey perhaps, but due to his sheer dominance, I think he deserves that top spot. Secondly, Ricochet, he did just lose on Monday, but again, we're not counting it. He was 3-0 in one-on-one matches since the Royal Rumble, and so he's getting that second spot. Third, he also lost on Monday night, but he was 2-0 entering Raw, so Sheamus is our #3 contender for the IC title. Who should not be an Intercontinental title contender? Big Bronson Reed. He lost both of his matches since WrestleMania, and as just noted, he has now fallen to 1-5 in one-on-one matches in 2024. Chad Gable, nowhere to be found. He would be closer to the non-contender than contender list as well. For the Raw Tag Team Championships, won by the Awesome Truth at WrestleMania, the #1 contenders are now the Authors of Pain. They haven't even wrestled yet on Raw, moving over from SmackDown last week, where they did just beat the New Catch Republic and improved to 3-1 in traditional tags. But saying that, the #2 contender will be the New Catch Republic, as even with that loss, they are 7-2 in traditional tags, but with the loss to AOP, they've fallen just below them for the moment. Thirdly, the New Day. Now, Kingston did say that Woods is out of action for now, but with them winning their last 2 traditional tag matches, they're going to hold on to the #3 contender spot to see if Woods is able to make a return anytime in the near future. But who should not be the Raw tag team contenders? The Alpha Academy, really any combination of them, but in this particular instance, we mean Otis and Tozawa. They got a title match the week before that they hadn't really earned, but merely by Gable tricking R-Truth, but it didn't help, as those two fell to 0-2 in tag team matches in 2024. Moving on to SmackDown, the undisputed WWE Championship, now held by Cody Rhodes and defended successfully at Backlash. The top contender we're giving to LA Knight. He is now 5-2-1 in one-on-one matches in 2024, following his win on SmackDown. Secondly, Santos Escobar is going to move up from our list of US title contenders to WWE Championship contenders, as he has won his last 3 one-on-one matches. Thirdly, AJ Styles is still going to barely hang on to that 3rd spot, even though he doesn't really deserve much. As we noted, he's fallen to 1-4 in singles matches in 2024. However, he is 2-1 in any singles match since WrestleMania, which is way better than anyone else is doing on SmackDown. Who shouldn't be the top contender? I bet you can guess. Yeah, it's Roman Reigns. He, of course, has not even dared to show up and apparently doesn't even talk to Paul Heyman anymore. So he's just completely off the radar. I'm not expecting him to return anytime soon, if at all, because he just can't handle losing. Let's move on to the WWE Women's Championship, won by Bayley and retained at Backlash. We're going to leave Naomi as the #1 contender on the account that she actually beat Tiffany Stratton for the #1 contendership a few weeks ago. Then Tiffany forced a no contest that ruined her chance at the championship. Fortunately, she did get the triple threat match at Backlash. However, with no one else really in the running at the moment, she's going to remain the #1 contender for a proper one-on-one championship match. Secondly, the other member of the triple threat match, Tiffany Stratton. She has also not fared well in multi-person singles matches like Naomi, but she is 5-1-1 in one-on-one matches, plenty good to be the #2 contender. Thirdly, well, this one's a bit of a stretch as well, and you can see this is more of an indictment of both brands merely having one-on-one women's matches on Raw and SmackDown, but we're going to go with Candice LeRae moving over from Raw to SmackDown. Now, Candice probably would have been our #1 contender on the Raw side, but unfortunately, she's no longer there. However, she is an impressive 2-0 in one-on-one matches in 2024. Who should not be the #1 contender? We have moved Nia Jax way off this list. After a strong start to the year, she has lost 3 straight singles matches and is going to need to win something on SmackDown before we can start to consider her again. Moving on to the United States Championship that Logan Paul was able to successfully retain at WrestleMania, but he has not defended it since. So, we're going to leave one of his 2 contenders at WrestleMania. At the top, Randy Orton. He is 6-0-1 in one-on-one matches since returning from his injury and certainly deserves a one-on-one shot at Logan Paul. Number 2 on this list, moving over from Raw to SmackDown, Andrade. He is 6-1 in all matches since returning to the WWE, so he certainly is going to need a shot here very soon. Thirdly, we're going to leave him just barely on this list. Kevin Owens does have a pretty good 3-1 record in one-on-one matches in 2024, but he has just not been successful overall in any match of late, including losing with Orton at Backlash to the Bloodline. Who should not be on this list? Well, based on what I've been saying the last few weeks, you can probably guess it's Carmelo Hayes. He has just simply struggled on the main roster and is 0-3-1 in singles matches in 2024. For the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, that A-Town Down Under just successfully retained at on last week's SmackDown, we're going to surprisingly give the #1 contender spot to Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga. Yeah, I did not expect this, but surprisingly enough, they are the only tag team who has won a traditional tag team match on SmackDown since WrestleMania, other than, of course, A-Town Down Under's win last week. So we'll give it to them for now, but our #2 contender is going to be DIY, moving over from Raw to SmackDown. They have been up and down recently, but they're at least 1-1 in all tag matches since WrestleMania, so at least they have some win to hang their hat on. Thirdly, similarly, we're dropping the Street Profits down to #3 spot here. They've not had a good record overall at 1-3, but they are still 1-1 in tag matches after WrestleMania. So with their loss, they're moving down the list, but they do have a win that at least earned them the right for that championship shot. So that's good enough on SmackDown to be the #3 contender. Who should not be a contender? Well, this time, Legado del Fantasma, they've dropped all the way down. That, of course, is Angel and Berto in their exact partnership. They've lost 3 straight tag team matches after having a pretty decent start to the year, so they're going to have to get back in the win column before they become a true contender. Lastly, since this represents both brands, we're talking about the Women's Tag Team Championships, won at Backlash by Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair when they beat the Kabuki Warriors, who will remain, of course, the #1 contenders. They just suffered their first loss at Backlash, so it would be pretty difficult not to give them a rematch when they are 5-1-1 in 2024. Moving on to our #2 contender, it's going to be Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell. Very nice of Indy to successfully be on both lists for now. These two have won 3 of their last 4 tag team matches. Third on this list, even though they're both competing in Queen of the Ring, Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark are going to be our #3 contenders, even though they have not competed since WrestleMania and lost their last match as a tag team in a championship match. They are still in a very impressive 6-1 in 2024, very well suited to at least be our #3 contender. Who shouldn't be a contender, sadly for us, Carter and Chance. They've now lost 5 in a row, so they're going to need to find a way to get back on the winning side before they can be considered. So that's our recap of all the WWE championships, and now we know who's next. So let's finish it off this week with our suspensions, terminations, and fines. And our STFs, first on SmackDown, we had a fine for Karrion Kross when he took out Tyler Bate during the tag team match. Then another fine for Grayson Waller when he punched Montez Ford right before the bell, gaining a slight advantage for their team. Thirdly, we have another fine, this time for AJ Styles with his slap on Cody Rhodes right at the very end of the show. But lastly, our big one, we have a 1-week suspension for Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga for attacking Orton and Owens during the RKO show. We also have a 1-week suspension for Owens for his cannonball onto Sikoa and Tonga that also took out some security guards. While that part was probably not intentional, it still was collateral damage that earns him the suspension. But lastly, Randy Orton is going to get a 2-week suspension for his blatant attacks on a couple of security guards during that fracas. So then at Backlash, we're going to give none of those same people any fines or suspensions for their pre-match battle because that all seemed to be very fair and even. They were really happy to fight each other before the bell no matter what. And a street fight was probably the right call, except that then allowed a new Bloodline member to emerge without any consequences. Secondly, we have a fine for Finn Balor for attacking Jay after the World Heavyweight title match. But even bigger, we have a full month suspension for JD McDonough for first yanking the rope, causing Jay to get caught in the ropes, then potentially changing the outcome of a championship match by putting Priest's foot onto the bottom rope, preventing him from being pinned, and finally also joining Balor in that attack on Jay after the match. Finally, on the Raw side, we do have a fine for the 3 members of Damage Control for circling the ring and then attacking Becky and Liv. Well, I guess Liv didn't actually get attacked because she ran out of the ring before the attack could begin. But nonetheless, still a fine for Dakota, Io, and Kyrie. We also have a 1-week suspension for Sami Zayn for interfering in the match between Gable and Reed, causing the disqualification, and then for continuing to attack Gable and Reed after the match. Lastly, we have a 1-week suspension for Ludwig Kaiser for tying Sheamus's foot into the rope that allowed him to drop kick Sheamus, injuring his knee that helped Gunther eventually get the win, and for then being ejected for that attack. So there you have it. Those are our STFs of the week. Bianca and Jade proved to be too strong for the Kabuki Warriors, while all the other champions managed to retain. Dragunov and Valkyria got off to great starts on the main roster, and Gunther and Sheamus slapped each other silly as usual. I'm Dr. O'Kay, reporting on the WWE, where everything is okay!